Hi there, my name's Amy Merkel and I'm a counselor as well as the Transfer Center Director at Santa Rosa Junior College. And today I'm going to be providing you with an overview of the transfer process so that you can understand what it is that your child is experiencing and can start those conversations with them so that they also have a better understanding of what it is that they need to do to have a smooth transition from SRJC to a four-year university. I want you to know that there's lots of help for your student in the Transfer Center. We assist students from the time they enter SRJC all the way through them transferring on to the four-year university. Our goal isn't just for your child to transfer, but to earn a bachelor's degree or go even further. So we look forward to working with them as they go through this process, and we hope that this video will help you to have a better understanding of how things work. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So first off, congratulations, because your baby's going to college. I'm sure that it's something that you thought was a long ways away, but here it is. And things have changed if you yourself are a college graduate. Unless you graduated in the last couple of years, things are a little bit different from when we were in college. So it's important to understand how things work now. This graph here gives a good visual of what it's like to be a transfer student. So as a student at SRJC, students are starting out with their lower division coursework. Sorry about that, I was trying to move the screen a little bit so you could see those words, the bottom, there we go. So the student enters SRJC and they plan to transfer to a four-year university. So the minimum number of units to transfer from SRJC to a CSU or a UC is 60 transferable units for them to start as a junior at the CSU or the UC. California privates and out-of-state campuses, their requirements can vary. So it's important to check with each school to see what their requirements are. For some of the privates or the out-of-state campuses, they'll consider a student a transfer student or if the student has graduated from high school and they've completed at least 12 units. So it just varies, and it's important to do that research, and we can help students with that as well. So as the student is at SRJC, they are taking their lower division coursework. And that lower division coursework is courses to prepare them for their major. So the sooner they know their major, the better, because then they can start taking courses that are working towards major requirements. They can also take general education courses as well as electives to get to that 60 units. If along the way the student can earn an associate's degree, then we will help them through that process as well. Or if they wanted to get a certificate, we can also advise students on that information too. Once the student transfers, they're now in their upper division coursework, their junior and senior courses. So it's a minimum of 120 units to get a bachelor's degree. And their bachelor degree courses are going to include their upper division major courses. That'll be the majority of their coursework. Students, if they complete all of their lower division general education at SRJC, they still have 9 units of upper division general education to complete. So they're not quite done yet. And then if a student wants to earn a minor or they have some room to take some elective credits, they're welcome to do that as well. So I'd just like to talk about this 60 transferable units here. Students can definitely have more than that. That's not, going to be something that would get them denied. But the four-year universities, particularly the CSUs and the UCs, typically will only accept 70 transferable units from a community college or another college and apply those units towards graduation. So let's say your student transfers with 75 units. They will count 70 units towards graduation. They recognize those 5 units. Let's say it was a course for their major or something like that. They're not going to make the student repeat the course, but they can't show up with 100 units and only need 20 more to earn their bachelor's degree. And that, when I put it like that, people typically understand that quite well. All right, so the transfer process, the four-year universities really want students prepared for their major. So that is one of the major differences between how things used to be and how things are now. So many students are told, just go to SRJC for 2 years and do your general education and you're good to go. And that is absolutely not true. So depending on the major, there could be a lot of major prep coursework that has to be done, especially if your student is majoring in a STEM field. So let's say the major of biology. If the student wants to transfer to UC Davis, they're going to need 3 biology courses, and the prereq to get into those courses is an intro to bio as well as chemistry. Typically, the student's going to need at least 2 semesters of chemistry, possibly even 4. They'll need at least 2 semesters of calculus. They could take physics with us. Some students choose to do it once they have moved on to the four-year university, but there's lots of major prep that needs to be done. The second piece of the pie here is general education or admissions requirements. So another common myth is that general education has to be done to transfer. And in most cases, that is not true. There are some schools, particularly UC Davis for the College of Letters and Sciences, where the general education pattern does need to be completed. But for the majority of campuses, you do not have to have general education done. You have to meet admissions requirements. So those two things are different. So for example, for the UCs, the admissions requirements are 2 English courses, a math class, and 4 GE courses. So it's very different from completing an entire general education pattern. The third piece of the pie here, if the student has time, they could work on graduation requirements, they could start taking electives if they choose, or if they know they want a minor in something, they could also do some coursework towards that minor. What we try to do with students is make these things overlap. So for instance, if the student is a history major, they're going to need lots of history classes. To graduate from the CSUs, you have to have a U.S. history, and that U.S. history is also on the general education sheet. So for a history major, they're going to meet all 3 pieces of this pie with 1 course. And so we work with students on doing that. So the sooner a student knows their major, the better. Just we can help them plan and make their time go by a little bit faster if they know right from the beginning what it is that they want to work on. This is just comparing the CSUs and the UCs. So to transfer to a CSU, a student needs 60 transferable units, and at SRJC, a transferable unit to the CSU is any course numbered 1 to 99. They need to complete their lower division major prep, and low unit major prep, the student can complete the CSU general education breadth as well. And for high unit major prep, they're just going to work on that and admissions requirements. So we would work with the student on that. It's a minimum of a 2.0 GPA for California residents to get into a CSU. However, there are many majors and schools that are impacted that require a higher GPA. So the higher GPA, the better for your student, the more opportunities they'll have to be able to apply to specific campuses and programs, and it just leaves the door a little bit wide open for them. The UCs, the student needs 60 UC transferable units, and those transferable units for UC are in courses numbered 1 to 47. They need lower division major prep done. If they're in a low unit major, then they can complete IGETC, which is the GE pattern for the UC. If they're in a high unit major prep, they're going to complete admissions requirements and not worry so much about the GE pattern, unless it's UC Berkeley College of Letters and Sciences. So we work with students on that. To get into a UC, it's a minimum of a 2.4 GPA. However, very few students get in with a 2.4. So we highly recommend for UCs, students are really at a 3.0 to be competitive. For Berkeley and LA, really they want to be at 3.5 or higher to really feel comfortable in the admissions cycle. So impacted campuses and majors for the CSU, Fresno, Fullerton, Long Beach, San Diego State, San Jose State, and San Luis are the impacted campuses, meaning every single major on those campuses are impacted. So an example here would be San Diego State. They typically receive about 90,000 applications each and every year. So they obviously can't let in 90,000 students. And so they have to create criteria where students have to complete certain things. They have to have a specific GPA. So it's competitive. So what we tell students is, if you're applying to San Diego State, you need to have a second choice. And your second choice should not be, San Luis or Long Beach, or if it is, then you need to keep going down. So if you think about, a bell curve, you want to have like 2 safety schools, 2 competitive schools, and 2 schools that are a little bit more iffy possibly. So we typically recommend students apply to between 3 and 5 campuses so that they have a good shot at getting into a campus that they're really interested in attending. Impacted majors vary by campus, but these are the most common impacted majors: business, communications, criminal justice, engineering, nursing, and psychology. There can definitely be more. It just varies by campus as to what the impacted majors are. So with an impacted campus or an impacted major, it means that they have more students applying into that program or into that school than they have space for. So they create that criteria to then rank students. When a major is impacted, typically the program requires a supplemental application. So the student applies to the CSU and then they're asked to complete a supplemental where they tell the school what their GPA is, what certain classes have been completed with the required grade, and they may be admitted as a pre-major, meaning they need to take something at that campus before they're admitted into the full major. So that varies by campus, but there are a few campuses that do that. The Associate's Degree for Transfer was a program that was created a while back, and what it is it's an agreement between the California community colleges and specifically the CSUs. However, there are some California privates as well as some out-of-state campuses that accept the Associate's Degree for Transfer. And what it is completing an associate's degree while completing major prep for the major that the student wants to do. So for example, if a student is a psych major, they complete the psych associate's degree for transfer, and that is meeting the major prep requirements for the specific campus. So we research the CSUs, make sure each campus that the student is applying to accepts the ADT for major prep, and then we move on from there. So these are really beneficial for students who are preparing for impacted CSU majors or campuses, as well as applying to several different CSU campuses, because if they can follow one set of criteria on the coursework that needs to be completed, it just enables them to keep things a little bit more straight. So there's a website that we work through where we do a program search to make sure that the major is accepted by that CSU campus, and we'll work with your student on doing that. So what are the benefits of doing an ADT? So a student who earns an ADT from a California community college, they're following that universal lower division major prep. They're earning an associate's degree along the way. They're guaranteed admission to a non-impacted CSU campus with a similar non-impacted major. So they're not guaranteed admission to Cal Poly San Luis for the psych major, but they can apply to Cal Poly San Luis. If they do not get in, they're guaranteed somewhere within the system. So the CSU will reroute them to a campus and offer admissions there. Students do get a GPA bump when applying to an impacted campus or major. And then after they transfer, they're required to complete 60 more units. So if they are able to do just 60 units with us, 60 units at the CSU, there's their 120 to graduate. So we do not have ADTs with every single major because there are majors, especially in STEM, where it's more than 120 units. And this rule here is also if the student were to change their major or to add a minor, then that 60 units becomes void because then there is more work that the student needs to do. So some competitive UC campuses and majors. So all UCs are competitive for admissions, but especially UC Berkeley, UCLA, and UC San Diego. Those are the most impacted campuses that are quite competitive for admissions. The most competitive majors for the UCs are the sciences, especially within biology and chemistry, engineering, economics or business, communications, film, and psychology. But again, each campus can have their own impacted or competitive majors. The selection criteria, number one is GPA. So that's huge. Again, really shooting for at least a 3.5, if not higher. And then the strength of academic preparation. So how much major prep is done. And then the UC also looks at their campus or community involvement, and this is for after they've graduated high school. So what have they done since beginning their college career, not what they did in high school. The Transfer Admission Guarantee, or the TAG, is a program for California community college students who are interested in going to a UC. You cannot tag to Berkeley, LA, or San Diego. So the most competitive schools do not offer tags. But what a student can do is they can write a tag to UC Davis and then apply to Berkeley, LA, and San Diego. And if they got into one of those campuses, they can tell Davis, thanks for the tag, but I'm going to go to UCLA or whatever it is that they're choosing. In order to tag, students have to have 30 units completed at the time that they write their tag. 30 UC transferable units. Let me just clarify that. So tags are written in the month of September. So by the end of that summer, students need to have their 30 transferable units done. They need to meet a specific GPA requirement, and sometimes there are certain courses that need to be completed. And then they're guaranteed admission. So we'll use UC Davis as an example. To get into UC Davis, many of the majors, if they're not selective, students only need a 2.8 GPA. But to tag, a student would need a 3.2. So the GPA needs to be higher. And then when they tag, they also have to have at least their first English class done, the second English class done by that following fall. And then they have to have math done by the end of fall as well. And so there's just certain criteria that has to be met. And that information is on the Transfer Center website. So students can start looking at that now. For independent and out-of-state schools, it's important that students gather information about those schools. So what are the required units to transfer? What's their selection criteria? Do they have to write an essay? Is there a specific GPA that needs to be done? Any specific courses? What GE requirements do they have? Would they accept the CSU GE pattern or the IGETC? And then what's the application procedures and deadlines? So what I typically recommend students do is start some type of grid for themselves. They can actually find one on the Transfer Center website to get them started, and then to start gathering this information. Once they've gathered some basic information, they can visit either the counseling office or the Transfer Center and bring that information in, and then we can sit down and write an ed plan with the student. What we typically recommend is that the student then have that plan reviewed by the university that they plan to apply to. And especially the smaller campuses, they're very, very student friendly, and they're happy to answer specific questions and give very specific information. So we highly recommend that students take that time and opportunity to do that. It's important to talk cost. So independent and out-of-state campuses, average cost is about $30,000. And so you want to have that conversation with your student. How much financial aid do you guys think that you would receive? Maybe, how much do you have in college savings, if any? And so what is that going to be like, and is it a possibility? And then the student can confirm and carry out their plan. So here's some average costs of attendance for the different systems. So for the CSU, depending on where the student is living, it's between $18,000 to $32,000. The tuition and fees are the same. So they're $5,742 per academic year for students enrolled in more than 6 units. However, that's the baseline, and then each campus can add on fees to that. So for example, if a school builds a rec center, they typically then pass some of those fees on to the student. And so you may see that the tuition and fees are actually, $7,840 or something. And so this is just the baseline for the tuition and the fees. The biggest cost to going to college really is housing. That's huge. And so if there's, an auntie your student can live with, or, break down cost in that type of way, that's definitely going to help you. For the UC, living on campus is estimated at $36,000 and off campus at $34,000. Their tuition and fees are about $14,000 per academic year for full-time enrollment, and UC does require full-time enrollment. The private and out-of-state universities, they just really vary, from as little as $5,000 to $50,000. But the average tuition fees that I found on the U.S. News report is about $35,000. So just keeping that in mind for yourself. So some resources for financial support. There's the FAFSA or the CATA that students can fill out. So the FAFSA would be for Pell and Cal grants. The California DREAM Act would be for students who are undocumented and need some financial assistance. SRJC has a ton of scholarships available, but students often don't realize that, and they miss applying for them. So we recommend students apply every year. There's 2 different scholarship applications. One is for continuing students. So if your student is a new student at SRJC, they can start that application in the spring. I believe they need 12 units completed with a certain GPA. And then once they're ready to transfer, they can actually fill out a scholarship application for transferring students. So we highly recommend this. It's not a hard application, and students typically get more than one scholarship award because not very many people apply. The UC's Blue and Gold plan, that would be one that you would definitely want to look into. If your family makes less than $80,000 and your student applies for the FAFSA or the CATA, then the UC will come in and cover the rest of their tuition. So if FAFSA didn't cover all of the tuition, the UC's Blue and Gold would step in and cover the rest of the tuition, not the housing. So it's important to realize that. There's also the California Middle Class Scholarship, and then Western Undergraduate Exchange is for schools on the West Coast. So let's say your student is interested in going to Washington or Oregon. You want to look up if it's a WUI school, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, and if so, do they do WUI for transfer students? And if so, then what is the tuition? So they will bring the cost of the tuition down quite a bit for students going from one Western state to another. So that's definitely worth taking a look into as well. These are just some transfer tips. So if your student needs to decide on their major, enrolling in Counseling 6 is a good idea. They can also work with the Career Development Services, or what's now called the Career Hub. They have different workshops and resources. We highly recommend that students meet with university reps. It's never too early. So we have reps that will talk with your student about their campus, what they need to do to be a competitive applicant. They can give information about the major or resources, all kinds of things. So that's important. We have an annual transfer day in the fall semester. And so this, when we are in person, the transfer day is held in the dining commons, and we have about 50 universities that come and talk with students. And we're doing things a little bit different in the remote environment. So if you're watching this and we are in remote, then check out the Transfer Center website for that information. We highly recommend that students work with a counselor each and every semester so that they know if things have changed. They're just staying on top of information. So to check in with a counselor each semester, either in the Transfer Center or in the counseling office. Remind your student to do Me First, which stands for Math and English. So do not put off Math and English. Those are really, really important classes. And students want to get those completed to show the university that their admissions requirements have been done successfully. We highly recommend that students get involved on and off campus, especially if they're applying to a UC or a California private or out-of-state campus. Those schools typically want to know, what have you been doing besides just your academics? Keeping the GPA up is really important. I typically tell students, don't wait until you're in trouble to go to tutoring. If you know that a subject, most commonly it's math, gives you trouble, then go for tutoring right away. Don't wait. Get some help. Get to know the tutors so that they know you and where things might trip you up. So definitely take advantage of tutoring. Students can visit campuses to narrow down their college list, so they can take a virtual tour first, and then they can plan a visit to see how do they feel on that campus. Is it a good fit? Do they see other students that look like them? Do they see student support services that they could access, or clubs that interest them? Go visit the department that they're interested in majoring in to get information. And then we recommend that as a family, you set up weekly meetings to talk college. So instead of having, the conversation of how's school's fine. If you just ask once a week, they may not be so bothered by it, and you might get a little bit more information than school's fine out of them. But we also encourage students to include you in their decision-making process and to help them to process through all of this information, because you know them and you know where they can succeed. So we want your student to partner up with you. These are just some web resources, and you can find this information on the Transfer Center website as well. So Assist is a website that can help students who are going to a CSU or UC determine what coursework they need to complete for their major while they're at a community college. And then I have here just the Cal State website, California colleges, as well as the University of California. So I hope this helped you to gain a better understanding of the transfer process. And we look forward to working with your student as they move forward on reaching their goal of transferring on to a four-year university and earning their bachelor's degree.